I would say at the end of the day, entertainer embodies a lot of them. You know, songwriting is definitely the most challenging of all of them for me. It's a wonderful challenge, and it's also the most fulfilling, probably because it's such a challenge. But I think entertainer is a nice umbrella, because when I put all the pieces together, for me it's ultimately about performing on stage. And I think the modeling and the recording and even the songwriting and all of it just is leading to one thing for me. It's the onstage performance. So if the songwriting and the recording and the modeling can get people to the show, for the performance, that's so that I can entertain, that's what I'm all about. So I'd have to go with entertainer. That's an interesting one to take on, because I feel like the process of inspiration is it's so ethereal and ephemeral, and to be called a muse or considered a muse, if it's a title someone wishes to give me, I'm open to taking it on, but I could never call myself that. If it happens, wonderful, but that's not one that I would give myself. Well, David is a very special character in my life for so many reasons, but it's been a long-term friendship and creative collaboration. You know, at this point, maybe 12 years, maybe 13 years. It's ongoing, which in itself initially is a very precious thing, to have long-term friendships and long-term collaborators. And just to find a musical partner and someone that you relate to and are inspired by and you trust completely is a very precious thing. And the fact that it was David and the circumstance that we were able to meet was, you know, it was beyond special, and I never get used to it. I'm grateful every day that it happened and that it continues and that it yielded such a beautiful product that I'm so proud of. And you know, it's a sweet thing to consider that this person who is such a magnificent being has given me the gift of all the time and energy and the collaboration and the creation of our work. So, I mean, I have nothing but really wonderful things to say, because that has been my entire experience. It was very positive, and felt very honored for all of our shared relationships, the friendship and the collaboration, and just all the time I've been able to spend in his presence has been quite special. Well, the friendship is ongoing, and he asks for updates, you know, because this process was a long time for both of us, and while there was never this hard and fast goal to put out a record by a certain time and put it out into the world and have this whole process that's been taking place, that wasn't necessarily always what we had in mind. It just organically evolved to be that. But since it has happened, and since the record is being well received, I like to connect with him and let him know how it's going. And he's very enthusiastic, and he gives me advice and assists me in my process with all kinds of, you know, just he gives great advice and excellent counsel, because he's been through so much himself. And when it looked like that Europe was really where this music was getting going, he said, go with it. Just ride that train, and because you don't need to feel like it has to happen in America just because you're from America. If it's if it's being acknowledged and if it's being received well, go where that's happening, and that's a gift. And so I feel very grateful that I can share these things with him, and he offers guidance, and that he's a very wise soul. He's got a lot to offer. I have more experience, for instance, with Brian Setzer. We were on tour together for 7 weeks, and I was able to sing with him and be on stage with him, and had a wonderful experience. And I performed before his show for 7 weeks in the opening performance, and then when he played, I listened every night. I really enjoyed his performance and his showmanship, and the show was just sublime, and I never got tired of Brian's performance. I mean, like, every night for 7 weeks I watched his show, and we became friendly, and he was a very, very kind soul. Willie Nelson I have only a few experiences with, but we shared the stage together, and he was just you know, being around him, he's one of these very radiant people. You know, you just, when he comes around, you can feel it before he gets there. He's a magnanimous person, and when I met him a few times, I just sat with him and pet his beautiful hair and we shared only a few words, but I felt like we didn't need to say much. And I obviously respect him so deeply and think so highly of his work. And when I was performing and he came on stage to play and sing with my band, it was quite a thrill, something I will never forget. Donovan, yeah, he's great. I was able to perform with him during a David Lynch weekend at the Maharishi University in Fairfield City, Iowa. And Donovan is just such a sweet man, and I was able to sing Season of the Witch, which is this amazing song, on stage with him, and several other songs. And then a very special thing happened. We were able to sing Across the Universe together, and that is one of my favorites. And you know, Donovan had been close to the Beatles during that time frame, and shared a story about John Lennon. And you know, he said, my old friend John Lennon, and he said, my new friend Chrysta Bell. And I had a moment. I barely made it on stage to be mentioned in the same breath by such an extraordinary person. I've been very fortunate in those ways. When I write, it depends on whether it's a spontaneous lyric that's coming through, in which case I'm not usually thinking about anything. I'm usually driving. That's where most of my lyrics come through. But if I am consciously sitting down to hopefully bring through some lyrics or some melodies, I can't say that there's any particular artist that I'm looking to use maybe as an inspiration, more of a hoping to connect with that universal field of creativity that all of these artists connect to, and some of them seem to have a direct line. So I'm not necessarily considering any one of these artists in particular, but I'm definitely, hoping to bring something through that is special and fantastic. And certainly, having been around these people, you understand that it is possible, and they are actually just human beings, but they worked really hard, and they've somehow been able to get a direct connection to that creative space. So that certainly inspires me. The lyrics and the melody generally come out at the same time. So if there is a lyric, it's almost always married instantly to a melody, and then from the initial melody, I can build. I can say, okay, well, this is it. If that's the only way I know how to start, actually. So then I have the first part of it, and then I can think, okay, well, now I've got kind of the mood of the song, and the melody usually tells me the mood of the song, even if there's no music. And so then from there I can develop what the other lyrics will be and how the melody will change. But that first line, usually it starts with the first line, is very important, and I never know when it's coming, and it's very hard to make it happen. But fortunately, I do a lot of driving, and that's when it usually happens. So, and it's terrible. I take my phone and I do my voice memo, and I do that while I'm in the car, and just a little bit can help it take off, you know. As long as one little bit just comes out of that magic place, I can massage the rest of it to come along later. And then, depending on whether I want it to be a collaboration with someone else, I might take, you know, the melody that I've come up with and go home and sit with my guitar and figure out what key it should be in, and then sometimes, you know, the melody can change a bit, but when I write with myself, I write on guitar. I support it on guitar, or I've been known to just write entire songs with just lyrics, layers and layers of lyrics and melodies and counter melodies, and those are some strange songs. And then if I have a collaborator, potentially it could be any number of instruments on piano, or sometimes just a drum machine. I can put a song together and then layer strings or something with it, and it really depends on the project and depends on what my hope for the song is. If I want to share the song, then I'll be more complete with it and develop it as much as I can. And if I just, some songs aren't ever meant to be heard, so those I just get as strange and experimental as I want to be. There's a lot of those floating around. Oh, by far the passion. And that's something that was reinforced by David because I grew up in a recording studio. My parents owned and ran a recording studio in South Texas, and I did, you know, voiceovers and jingles, you know, like commercials, and those have to be technically perfect. And then I was in some bands where the idea of the music was to be just, it was electronic music, and so it was all about this, your voice was more of a texture, and it was more almost like an instrument, and so it was made to be perfect. But as David and I began writing more together, and he was completely the opposite. He was all about the performance and the passion and the feeling, and how that was able to complete a song much more so than any kind of technical perfection. And it was difficult at first because I was so used to, you know, singing jingles and being a studio vocalist and singing electronic music, and David was all about the performance of and the emotion, and sometimes my pitch is under, sometimes my voice cracks, but if it's right, if it feels right, that's the take. And so I had to be like, but okay, really? But, and he'd be like, Chrysta Bell, that's the one. And then I would listen and I would get it, and he was right. And it was all about what I was feeling in the moment that I was delivering was utterly authentic and just what the song needed. And it wasn't about the technical performance, and certainly that reflects life as well. You know, we can't make everything perfect. We need to just be in the moment and feel. Fortunately for This Train, the record This Train, David already had the genre of dream pop laid out for me, and Julie Cruz's record was considered dream pop, and I really like that subgenre, I suppose you could call it. I also call it dream track. I like to think that it might be the soundtrack to a dream. And when I was making the music, it was a very surreal and dreamy experience to be with David and to be in his studio and to be the vessel for these melodies coming through as I was listening to his, you know, beautiful, soulful music and, you know, just being a conduit for that process to take place. And so dream track works for me, and I don't know what anyone else's dreams are like, but in my imagination this music might work for that. And in general, I think that's what I shoot for, is kind of an otherworldly type of music that just takes you someplace else. That's certainly my goal with music, is to take you to another dimension for a little bit. My mother has always sung to me and been a professional singer and also a studio musician, and it was basically second nature. You know, music was all around me, and it was also my passion. I was immersed in it from a very young age, and it was like, you know, I'm certain that if I had gone to university to study music, it would have been very helpful and a new side to music. What I did instead was join a band at that age and go on the road with musicians and tour and have shows every night and radio shows in the morning and record in stores every day, and I felt like that was a wonderful education. I've since gone back and studied music theory, and I have a better handle on music theory than I did a long time ago when I was basically just shooting in the dark, but you know, sometimes hitting things and more going from intuition. But I feel like in general music is this you can study music and you can learn the language, but there's always this very mysterious quality that I don't know can be taught, and either you speak that language or you don't. I don't know that any of the music that I create could necessarily be found, you know, the roots could be found in Texas music, but Texas is it's an interesting place, you know, and everyone's very feels connected to the land, and they're like, everyone's proud to be from Texas, and I have some of that because the land is beautiful and my family is from Texas. But
do you still live over there?
I don't live. I live in California. I live in San Francisco, but I lived in Texas most of my life, and I still have family and land in Texas. And my other business is I own a natural burial cemetery in Texas, and I have land and I have livestock, and so there is a part of me that is a Texas girl, but I don't know if that same Texas girl is the one who's writing the music. I think they might be from different places. But I love Texas, and I appreciate Texas music, but I don't know that I could connect the music that I make with having Texas origins. Maybe somebody could. I'd be curious. Well, two things I wanted to add about tonight's performance in particular, because specifically it is in Budapest, and I visited here right after high school, and I always had a very special connection, and I always remembered really liking and appreciating and wanting to return. So the fact that I am able to return under these circumstances is very special, and I feel very honored, and I really love this city, and I feel a beautiful connection to the city. So there's that first. As far as the performance, the theatrical qualities, you know, I bring them in and out of the shows depending on the venue and how I'm feeling, and so I've worked with all kinds of props and all kinds of things, and more on this particular tour to EU, I've been keeping it pretty simple and working with the visuals and working more with my body and movement than bringing in a lot of props, because it makes for a different performance. And I'm experimenting right now with the show. I've spent so much time making the record and working on the administrative part of getting the record out into the world that now I get to do some performing, and I'm still learning and building how I want to present myself with this music. I love it so much, and I feel so grateful for that exchange with the audience, and you know, it's very visceral. It's very you know, the recording process is a whole different kind of fulfillment, but to be able to perform that music for people live is just, it's very exciting, terrifying and exciting, probably because it's terrifying, but I really get off on it. And I'm still figuring out the best ways to deliver the songs. And every night I learn something a little bit more, how I want to work this set and how I want to work my presentation. So tonight there's a bit of theatrics involved, there's a bit of props, but for the most part I'm just delivering the music.